Well, hello everyone. How are you guys doing?
Hello.
How are you doing, Raven?
I'm good. How are you? Izzy, my Mizzy?
I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good.
Good.
Uh, Let everyone come in. I cannot wait to learn if it is acceptable to marry children. This is gonna be great.
Yeah.
Let me see. Uh, yup. I see you, bruh. Yeah, definitely get that popcorn.
Right? Wow.
Yup.
Yeah,
Walsh is
very.
here in the chat. What's up, man?
Hey, Walsh. What's up, dog? Yeah, very interesting topic you picked for us tonight.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, that'd be cool, bro. You can do that.
Yeah, I don't know who you are.
Yeah, he's someone I met on TikTok.
Nice. Okay. Cool.
Yup.
I love meeting new people that are excited about the Lord, and even though our world is crazy, he's still sitting on the throne.
Definitely.
Yep.
Yup. So, real quick, before we go into the debate, I wanted to give a quick introduction to this topic from a Islamic perspective, because I know there will be people here watching who aren't actually aware of like what Islam has said about this.
Yeah.
Um, so it might be worth going over that real quick before we start the official debate.
Okay.
Let me see here. I have the sources. Okay. Chat. I'm dead.
What?
No, I think someone I'm aware of is
Uh-oh.
in there.
You in trouble? What'd you do?
I don't think so.
Guess we'll find out, huh?
I hope not.
They'll be coming through those glass doors tonight.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh gosh. Well, hopefully people are going to be nice, but you're always going to have some that are a little less than nice, but whatever,
Right. I got you.
Comes with the territory.
Yeah. Oh, that's what's up. I'm glad you guys are here. Okay, so we are going to introduce this topic from a sort of Islamic perspective real quick. So I'm going to share, well, the screen's already shared, but I'm going to turn it on and then switch to this Quran verse. Yep. Okay. Can you see this?
I don't see anything.
Okay, I have to turn the thing on real quick then.
There it is.
Okay. Guys, let me know if you can see this. Can you see this, Raven?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. Yep. So this is obviously the holy book being the holy text in Islam. They view it as perfect and even perfectly preserved. So most people in Islam, at least, don't think they really have to deal with any sort of like textual history or tradition or anything like that, because they think the text is, like I said, perfectly preserved for the most part. So their view of the Quran is not the same as we view scripture.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big differences. But here we see in chapter 65, we are dealing with marriage.
Okay.
And so it talks about divorcing women and how to do that and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Just for reference, the iddah, if you hear that term, that is basically the waiting period here. Basically, when someone gets divorced, they have a 3-month waiting period, as it talks about here. They have a 3-month waiting period until they can be married again.
Okay.
So, as you see, this footnote references Quran verse 65, or excuse me, chapter 65, verse 4. Okay. Here it says, as for your women past the age of menstruation, in case you do not know, their waiting period is 3 months. So, in terms of a divorce, this is the waiting period for a older woman. Then the text says, and for those who have not menstruated as well. And that in particular is what I want to focus on for this, because in their holy book, this verse here, as you can see, is saying that you can marry people who have not menstruated yet. So, wow. Yeah. So the sort of
fixated on that, huh?
Say that again.
They're kind of fixated on that word.
Yeah, it's gonna come up a lot, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's like what? Okay.
Yeah. So it is in the Quran, and this was confirmed by a famous Muslim online named Haqiqatjou, a very well educated individual. He has a video where he's explaining this, and he basically argues that this verse says exactly that. And if you only had the Quran, then you would think, of course, that you could marry, and it would be perfectly fine for you to marry prepubescent girls because of this converse. And he very much plants his stake on that.
Yeah.
Sorry if the lights go out throughout this. Sometimes the lights don't always stay on in this
particular
building. Yeah. And then, okey-dokey. And then the other thing I want to show real quick is the hadith. So there are collections, books of collections of traditions and stories in ancient Islam. And these are viewed very highly in Islam. They're not scripture, they're not inspired by God or anything like that, but they are extremely...
They still hold them high in esteem, basically, though, right?
Yep. So this is one of them. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay. So Sahih Bukhari is one of their most trusted hadith sources. Probably their most trusted, arguably, for the most part. And here we see this thing is being narrated by. It says, while we were sitting in the company of the Prophet, a woman came to me and presented herself for marriage to him. The story continues on. Basically, she did not have even an iron ring to do the marriage in, but she would give him anything. The Prophet says, no. Do you know some of the Quran by heart? She says, yes. The Prophet said, go. I have agreed to marry her to you with what you know of the Quran. And then it references Quran 65 verse 4. And for those who have no courses, they are still immature. And the iddah for the girl before puberty is 3 months. So this hadith source is quoting this passage in the context of a girl coming to Muhammad for the purposes of marriage. And we can see a similar thing, and the thing that a lot of Christians have pointed out is, again, Sahih Bukhari, and this one is number 64, when Aisha herself is supposedly doing this narration and says the Prophet married her when she was 6 years old and consummated this marriage when she was 9 and remained with him for 9 years. And it's repeated again as well here and in a bunch of other sources, as was pointed out in a different debate that actually happened on this same night. So...
Okay, I'm done. No.
Yeah. No, I feel you.
That's enough.
So, this is a really big issue.
Yeah.
And Muslims tackle it differently. Daniel here, we'll particularly talk about Daniel's case for the purposes of what we're doing tonight.
Right.
Daniel, in particular, seems to think that this is perfectly fine. And believes that actually society will inevitably crumble if they let go of child marriage, as we'll see in his opening statement. So get ready to be impressed by the glory of Islam. I'm kidding. I should preface this by saying that there were Muslims who said like, no, like Daniel's position is ridiculous. I don't affirm his position, right? So
There's
Muslims are going
different
to disagree.
distinctions within their religion as far
Yes.
as what they believe and stuff. Okay.
Yeah, so Muslims are not all going to agree in unison that they can marry children and things like that.
Right.
I mentioned another debate that happened on this same night. There was a debate between David Wood and another Muslim, and this Muslim basically argued that we cannot trust the hadith, the traditions that are narrating the story of the age of Aisha. And so as a result, we can't say how old she was when this occurred, only that Aisha was a woman that married Muhammad. And among
a
some
woman
other
or
things
a
as well.
child.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, if the sources can be trusted, but even like critical scholars have like questioned very much so and seemingly pretty well the traditions, but most Muslims trust them. Trust some of them at least. So
and hi
either
to
way,
everyone in the chat. Hello. We're happy you're here. He's going to teach us a thing or two. This guy right here.
I hope. I spent like 5 or 6 hours doing uncomfortable research. So
I know, this is disturbing. It really is, you know.
Yeah. I mean, and that's not to say the biblical text doesn't say some very interesting things either, but
right.
Obviously the subject matter is interesting.
Yeah.
So we can go ahead and start if you're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay, so I will start with Inspiring Philosophy's opening statement. He's the Christian. He's the one defending children.
His name's Mike, right?
Mike Winger, yeah. Mm-hmm. Or not Mike Winger, excuse me. I'm sorry. That's a different guy. Michael Jones.
Okay.
Yeah, Michael Jones. Pretty cool guy. I would encourage you guys to check out his stuff. He does a lot of apologetic work. He has a master's in philosophy from a secular university. I believe the University of Arizona, he mentioned. Very good stuff there. So let me go ahead and go here. So we will start with his opening statement because I feel like a lot of people have honestly just assumed that the sort of the cultural norm of needing to be 18 or older for anything to happen, preferably has kind of just been that, a cultural norm that the West has decided. Some people might feel it's arbitrary and things like that. So I think that recounting the a little bit of the history and majority of the science behind these studies will kind of help people sort of remove that wall of ignorance.
And what I'd like before you start is when we see videos like this, it's helpful to do some research, like you said, to see more of what, the Islam religion teaches, but it's also encourages me to search the scriptures, what we really have been taught about certain issues as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's a very important thing to point out. Real quick, before I officially start, I just want to point out the fact that Chris Hansen is on the way. I'm sorry.
Just take a seat over there. Go ahead. Take a seat over there.
Yo, let's take a seat.
That's hilarious.
I thought it'd be kind of funny because Inspiring Philosophy actually makes a Chris Hansen joke. And
really?
Yeah. Okay, so here is Inspiring Philosophy's opening statement. Raven, if you have any commentary, just let me know. I can pause it, and I will do the same if I have something to mention as well.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, let's get into this.
It's a true treat to have you. We'll let you get the ball rolling, Mike, with your opening statement.
Thank you, James. Thank you to Modern Day Debate for hosting. So this is a debate I never thought I'd have to have because I assumed that as a species we realized the practice of child marriage was an abomination at this point. But apparently Muslims, like Daniel, think this is a practice he can defend as a moral good. The reason this debate came about was because Daniel publicly challenged me on the topic, which is fine. I've publicly challenged people, but when I've done so, I've reached out to them privately to set it up. This did not happen, which left me confused as if this debate was going to happen. But I contacted James to make sure we certainly got to this point. So here are my goals. I will argue the practice of child marriage is not morally permissible because of the harm it causes. It leads to physical abuse, bodily harm, psychiatric problems, and a high risk of death. So if you agree with Daniel, Chris Hansen would like for you to take a seat. Take a seat right over there as we dive in.
right over there.
Now, the United Nations defines a child as anyone below the age of 18. I suspect Daniel will disagree with this because it's not the age of adulthood historically. So, for the sake of clarity, I will define a female child as anyone who has not completed puberty. The CDC says puberty is complete in girls between 15 and 17, so it makes sense the following stage, age 18, is when we grant the status of adulthood. And so I will argue no one should really marry under 18, and no girl should be subjected to motherhood until she has decided to have a child and has matured enough. Obviously, there is some variation when that occurs. Therefore, I will argue consummating marriage with a girl who has not completed puberty and forcing her to bear children is immoral. Now, Daniel disagrees with the science that supports this assessment, and said in his debate with Destiny, in Islam you can consummate the marriage at puberty. Then in his post-debate review he said, what is so fundamentally wrong about consummating marriage at puberty? This is a question that none of these liberals can answer. All liberals can cite is like these abstract claims about what is psychologically beneficial or harmful. But this has not been established. This has not been established scientifically. It's all just what's culturally acceptable in the post-industrial superpowers.
So that should be pointed out, and this is going to become clear in Daniel's opening statement. But Daniel thinks in a false dichotomy, especially with this subject. It's either you agree with my conservative Islamic values on marriage, or you are a liberal who is inevitably going to allow and be for the sexualization of kids, fornication, porn, and all sorts of other things that he is going to mention. And that quote right there is evidence of that. He also seems to like confound liberals and Christians together, which is a weird thing to do for obvious reasons. Especially considering like even secularism, as inspiring philosophy has mentioned elsewhere, secularism is a corruption of Christianity. It kind of takes some of its morals and takes kind of God out the picture. So he has a very false dichotomy view of all of this.
It's very presumptuous of him. But unfortunately, we see this kind of dialogue even between Christians that don't agree. Oh, so you don't believe what I'm telling you, so you must think this way.
Yeah.
You know, it's like we got to learn how to agree to disagree in a godly way when we're talking to our brothers and sisters. So. Yeah,
definitely. False dichotomies are never good, for sure.
Well, that's what I'm going to answer tonight, and I'll explain why it is immoral. Because once again, child marriages lead to physical abuse, bodily harm to girls, psychiatric problems, and despite what Daniel has said, this has been demonstrated scientifically. So the first thing to note is puberty is not a boundary point girls cross over. It's a process. It takes time for a girl's hips to widen and for her to develop into a woman. This is nowhere near complete when a girl has her first period. To treat womanhood as a boundary point for girls and not as a process is an unscientific way to understand puberty. There is no reason to assume a girl becomes a woman the moment she shows any sign of puberty, let alone she be ready for marriage and childbearing. Yet this is the Islamic teaching on the issue, which Daniel has stated. Well, this study, that is marriage under 18, found that child marriage was significantly associated with delayed antenatal care, miscarriages, preterm delivery, low birth weight, health problems in newborn babies, faulty feeding practices, lack of knowledge regarding family welfare methods, and health implications. They know child marriages lead to serious health consequences. It also bereaves young girls of their childhood by overburdening them with domestic responsibility, motherhood, and sexual relations, rather than allowing them to play with friends or go to school.
I do want to mention something real fast. So that's obviously a big deal, right? Daniel was recorded recently, and he was caught actually mocking Islamic women who could no longer go to school due to what's going on over there in that country. And so he has this very like mocking tone. He's like, I can't go to school, and all sorts of other things. So he doesn't seem to care
about women. Amen.
Yeah, at least about them getting an education early on.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's just horrible.
Yeah.
The study continues and says that child mothers are physiologically and psychologically not prepared for childbirth. Maternal morbidity and mortality is also noted to be high in such young mothers. The girls lack the maturity and the education to properly nurture their own children, and then they make mistakes that hinder their own children's mental and social development, because the girls have had their own mental and social development hindered by being forced to marry so young. So they then hinder the development of their own children. So arguing for girls to be forced into these situations is blatantly immoral. In 2007, the United Nations Children's Fund reported that a girl under 15 is 5 times more likely to die during pregnancy and childbirth than a woman in her 20s. Another paper pointed out that girls under 18 are more likely to die from childbirth and debilitating illnesses like obstetric fistulas. In Mali, the maternal mortality rate for girls 15 to 19 is 178 per 100,000 of live births. And that is not just because of poor health care, because in the same country, the maternal mortality rate for girls, for women that is only 32 per 100,000. In Togo, for the same groups, the rates are 286 and 39. And the reason for these high numbers is because they're more likely to suffer from eclampsia, postpartum hemorrhage, and obstructed labor. Obstructed labor often leads to obstetric fistulas. That is where holes develop in the birth canal and can lead to leakage of urine, feces, blood, can cause nerve damage, the significant decrease in the likelihood of conceiving a second healthy child, as well as the death of the girl. The paper says girls 10 to 15 are especially vulnerable because their pelvic bones are not ready for childbearing and delivery. Their risk of a fistula is as high as 88%. Additionally, mortality rates are 73% higher for infants born to mothers than are children. Even the mortality rate for children under 5 born to child mothers can be 28% higher than those born to mothers over 20. Because as noted, many of these poor girls were not allowed to mentally mature, and they lacked the ability and education to properly care for their children. A 2022 study found that girls who marry under 18 were more likely to be physically, emotionally, and sexually abused by their husbands in 14 of the 16 countries they looked at, with strong correlations in 6. Additionally, they note pregnancy-related complications are the leading cause of death among adolescent girls in these regions. A review of the literature found that multiple studies have found the same result. They say the reason is because there is an extreme uneven power dynamic between the male and the female, mainly because of the age gap. The females, who lack decision-making abilities, constantly deal with harassment from their husbands and in-laws and are socially isolated.
Yeah, there was a study that I found that reviewed like 58 studies, and some of the data could have potentially been biased, and there were other issues that it talks about, but it does say that there was pretty much a agreement across all these studies that there is some kind of violence that is more often than not inflicted, whether that's physical, sexual, or otherwise, and that they basically all agree to that the mental health of the particularly the younger person decreased significantly, whether that was depression, anxiety. Yeah. He might talk about suicide. I believe he does in his opening.
Well, it's not just a matter of these poor girls not physically being ready to have a child. It's also the fact that our minds aren't fully developed till we're about 25. So you're trying to place this whole adult scenario on a child. So I'm not sure why, Daniel doesn't understand that. It's much more than just the body. The mind's involved too. Yeah,
definitely. And that is the thing. Like you would think you would want women to bear children, at least want to, right? At least want them to bear children when at least like the hips are widened, right?
The
canal can take it, right? They're mentally mature enough. I don't know if you've ever went to public school, but people are not. People are not mature.
Well, and even I shared with you that at 17, I was pregnant with my first baby. I was married. I'm Walsh's mom, by the way. But so I had my daughter at age 18. And in my mind, I knew I wasn't ready. My body wasn't even ready because she did some damage when I was giving birth to her, to me. So I couldn't even imagine a young child trying to birth a baby. It's insanity to me. I think anybody with half a brain understands a child's body is not the same as a woman's body.
So
Definitely. Anyways.
The review agrees with other research I cited that child mothers are likely to suffer from pregnancy-related complications, depression, and inadequate parenting skills. Another review shows evidence of stunted social development, depression, and anxiety in multiple studies. Here's another study which shows child marriages cause young girls to have more suicidal thoughts and attempts. They say the study's findings are compatible with findings in the United States that adult women married as children were 1.41 times more likely to have had a lifetime history of psychiatric disorders compared with women married in adulthood. We see evidence that younger marriages increase the likelihood of divorce. According to data from the CDC and Institute for Family Studies, 48% of those who marry before the age of 18 are likely to divorce in 10 years, compared to 25% of those who marry after 25. Daniel has repeatedly argued he wants strong marriages that do not end in divorce. If he thinks that, he should not be arguing in favor of child marriages. Now, I could go on, but I can find no psychologist or medical expert that agrees that child marriages should be allowed or practiced.
So notice a couple things. For one, these are 8 different really good studies, right? And they're just, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Especially because these 8 studies are not just studies in and of themselves. A lot of them are reviews of other studies.
Right.
So this definitely covers a lot of ground. And
yeah, it's not like he's just pulling it. I read somewhere in a book one day, I mean, this is scientific things that are being discussed here by experts, we should pay attention to that sometimes. So.
Definitely, yeah. And another thing to know, I know there are some apologists here, right? I have a apologetic series on my social media pages. What is really, really good that Inspiring Philosophy is doing is he did a lot of research on Daniel. Like he listened to like 3-hour-long videos from Daniel just to get an understanding of his mind, how he thinks, that sort of thing. And he's also quoting him, and you'll see this throughout the debate. I would encourage you guys to watch the full debate.
Yeah. You
can see this throughout the debate. He's quoting Daniel, and he even goes and looks at the sources and studies that Daniel cites and reviews them and adds them to his research as well. So that's, I think, a really important thing to do, and I think that's a really good way of like following what the proverb says, right? He who answers a matter before he has heard it is a folly to him, right? So we have to, if we're going to do something like this and engage in apologetics, we have to make sure that we're understanding people well.
Right.
For sure. Yeah.
They're described in these studies as a human rights violation because of the problems they cause. So there really is no escape from the conclusion. Child marriages.
Oh, hold on.
Attention YouTubers. Did you know that you can reach large audiences
related to the content that you want?
Marriages likely lead to physical and mental harm. Anyone claiming a society would be better if we force young girls into these situations is either misinformed or delusional. So let's ask why Daniel thinks child marriages are morally permissible. In the same debate review, he said, it's something that has been practiced historically in all cultures. Why? Because you have a limited...
Look at the timestamp in the background.
Yeah.
My man watched 5 hours of a video. I don't know.
He's probably like, let me try to figure out this brother. Yeah. Oh, yeah, he's whack. Okay.
I don't know if I could do that, honestly.
I don't know. I don't think I could. Not him, anyway.
I definitely appreciate IP for how thorough he was with this.
Right, absolutely.
The fertility window that women have to have children, and you value family. You need family, especially in most of the countries in the world, because children are going to work in the home, they're going to work for the family, bring money into your family. You need children, and your society needs more and more children to defend itself because wars are on the basis of manpower. So there's all these important economic, military, societal, familial objectives with having more and more children, and that requires maximizing the fertility window. Now, let's just set aside the fact that Daniel, either intentionally or unintentionally, said he was okay with child labor and children being used in wars. May not have meant it. But let's focus on this. He provided no argument that child marriages are morally permissible.
Yeah, that's the thing he's going to bring up right here. But that's really important to note. Arguing that something is useful doesn't necessarily tell me whether the thing is true or if it's moral.
Or if it's beneficial for the other party. How does this help kids? Oh, but he explains that, doesn't he?
Right. So that's a really important thing to note as well.
Yeah.
All Daniel has ever argued for is the pragmatic usefulness of child marriages, not their moral status. Allegedly, they maximize reproductivity and increase the population size, but this is not moral justification. For example, if you want to increase your society's birth rate, you can make rape and adultery legal. But they are morally impermissible despite having pragmatic value in increasing fertility.
Right.
Daniel has to give a moral reason for child marriages given the harm they cause. Do they increase virtue, decrease vice, help young girls to live flourishing lives?
Yeah, so inspired philosophy is really big on Christian virtue ethics. So his verbiage of vice and virtue and flourishing lives refers to that. Life is not about attaining pleasure or these sorts of things. Life is about building character and living a virtuous life rather than necessarily a happy life or pleasing life, that kind of thing.
And how you love your neighbor. Amen.
Right. And he's going to mention that in his opening statement. But yeah, I learned about virtue ethics in ethics class, this semester, and that was definitely an interesting thing to pick up on.
Yeah.
No. It's pretty clear from the data I cited that none of this is true. In fact, they're incredibly harmful. They increase mental health issues, stunt social development, lead to immoral acts like spousal abuse and suicide, and can even lead to physical harm and death. So it should be clear to every reasonable person there's no moral justification for child marriages. Furthermore, they may not actually help increase the society's reproductivity if they increase the likelihood of death for the mother or the children. An educated society should outlaw child marriages if they care about their people and their well-being. And most people will actually understand this. Research shows that child marriages decrease the more people become educated on this topic. But also, if we look at the average age women have their first children around the world, the country with the lowest age is Niger with a mean age of 18.5. So most countries where data is available actually understand it's better for a woman to wait for a girl to become a woman before she's expected to have children.
Right.
If Daniel was correct, it's beneficial for a society to force girls to have children. Why is it not practiced more? Well, the answer is pretty obvious. It's because most people understand it comes with all sorts of problems that actually harm your overall society. Daniel has also appealed to the past and has argued child marriages were perfectly normal before these Western Christians came along and ruined all the fun they were having with children. Well, first off, on behalf of Western Christians everywhere, you're welcome.
Let's freaking go.
Right?
But second, although child marriages have occurred in the past in many cultures, it still does not make them morally permissible.
Right.
Yeah, and Daniel is going to argue this in his opening statement. He's going to be like, magically, suddenly in the last 200 years only, people have worried about the dangerous effects of child marriage. And Inspiring Philosophy is going to go over some of this history. But even if Daniel was right and only like 1% of human history, maybe last 400 or 500 years, whatever, has thought child marriage was problematic, which isn't the case, why does that matter, right? Like, that's a Christian and that's a Muslim up there, right? So they both recognize that there are things that cultures and societies have done all throughout history and still do now that are wrong, like idolatry, right? Polytheism, like monotheism was a minority view as far as I'm aware in the history of religious and spiritual thought.
Well, even if something's socially acceptable or even the church accepts it, if it harms other people, we need to take a better look at that thing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's not an argument. That's a very weak argument, in my opinion.
Definitely.
And third, studies on the Roman Empire indicate the average age women were married was still in their late teens to early 20s. Like today, many in the past understood forcing a girl to bear children led to serious complications. For the Jews of the same time period, it would vary from region to region, with the Jews in Babylon marrying younger. But the scholar Michael Satlow has pointed out the average age Jewish women would marry was still in their mid-teens to early 20s and after they had matured. Some texts even speak of a woman being ripe for marriage at 20. So if Daniel wants to argue that Mary, the mother of God, was a child bride, I will contest that. Even medical experts before the modern era spoke out against marrying too young.
I should say something real fast. There was a TikTok video, and there have been TikTok videos since, that have tried to argue that Mary was raped because God, because God basically impregnated a child.
Dear Lord.
But as he mentioned, and as others have mentioned, the biblical text doesn't give an age, and due to the culture at the time, it was likely she would have been, as he says, late teens, early 20s, that sort of thing. So Mary wasn't a child bride, and
To say she was raped, that's just disgusting.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too, is that like obviously Mary consents in the text, like she wants the will of God to be done, and literally says as much. This man's on TikTok. He understands.
Yeah, I know all about TikTok and things they say. I'm like, really?
Oh yeah, it's great. You should join us sometime. I'll let him continue.
2nd century, Cyrannus of Ephesus warned problems result if girls are married too young, in childbirth, that is. Kim Phillips, in her book, points out that Albertus Magnus advised waiting until after puberty before attempting to conceive children. Giles of Rome even said it's best for girls to wait until 18 before consummating marriage, long before the rise of liberalism. Phillips also notes there was no single marker that indicated the transition into adulthood. It was understood as a process. She says canon legal theory on women's marriageable age offers a very limited perspective, and that social beliefs and practices provide a more reliable view of girls' transition to adulthood. Now again, these books and papers do accept that girls were married at younger ages at times. But if we follow what the current science shows us, it makes sense that many past cultures had such high infant mortality rates, if girls in those societies were having children at younger ages. Of course, Daniel doesn't need to defend marriage at 15 or 14, but consummating marriage with a 9-year-old. Because that is what Daniel accepts his prophet did when he consummated his marriage to his child bride, Aisha. And there's no reason to think this act set a good example for the rest of us.
Right.
Now, before closing, I suspect we might see some whataboutism from Daniel, where he might try to argue there are child brides in the Bible. The problem is this would be confusing descriptions with permissions. The Bible describes things that happened in the past without claiming they were good actions. God often tolerated the sin of the prophets and the patriarchs and proclaimed their actions were morally good.
That is something that should be definitely pointed out. Obviously, for example, right? We read in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah that Lot, that it seems, if I'm reading the text correctly and remember correctly, that Lot's daughters get him drunk and then have sex with him.
Noah.
Noah gets drunk, but after the event of Sodom and Gomorrah happened, Lot and his daughters are somewhere in the location.
It too? Oh my Lord.
Yeah. So, but it is, if I'm reading the text right, his daughters got him drunk and then had sex with him.
So it's the woman's fault, as usual.
Oh, I mean, obviously. No, I'm kidding. But
that's a good point. That a lot of times people, even some Christians, will say it was right there in the Bible, so God must have been okay with it.
Yeah.
That's not true, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're good. Real quick, people in the chat, can you let me know if this is like live on YouTube? I'm having some people who are saying they're having trouble getting this. Just let me know real quick.
You gotta love technology.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, Walsh? We had so many issues with our shows. Oh my Lord.
Okay, so I assume it's on YouTube for you then? Yeah.
I love that name, Let Me Explain. There's a lot of sarcasm there, and I love it, right? Let me explain this to you so you can understand it.
Yeah. Okay. We'll go ahead and continue.
I suspect he'll go to Numbers 31, where Moses tells Israel to kill all the Midianites, but keep the young girls for themselves. And I suspect Daniel will argue God was permitting Israelites to take virgin child brides. But scholars like Robert Alter and Paul Copan note this was not a command from God. The text says this is Moses acting on his own out of anger. In the chapter, God only commands Israel to make war on Midian. And after that, Moses becomes angry and tells Israel to go one step further without God's involvement. Moreover, in doing this, Moses violates the principles of Deuteronomy 20, which says to not kill the livestock, women, and children in war. So Moses' anger caused him to order something that God directly argued against in Deuteronomy. And as we find out later, Moses' anger eventually got the best of him. Furthermore, Christians are under the ethics of the New Covenant, not the Old. There's nothing in the virtue ethics of the New Testament that would remotely suggest child marriages are morally permissible. Paul and Jesus taught the way we fulfill the law of God is by loving one another. And obviously, instituting child marriages are one of the most unloving things we could do.
Amen.
Christianity lays down a normative system of virtue ethics. And virtue ethics requires we study circumstances and natural facts to know how to properly love others.
Right.
So given the science, Christianity is vehemently opposed to the practice of child marriage. And I can assure you that we Christians of the West will do everything in our power to end this obvious human rights problem promoted by people like Daniel.
Amen.
So I will press Daniel on this. He has to answer me on the studies I cited. Daniel, how can you claim child marriages should be practiced given the extensive harm they cause? If you argue in favor of child marriages, then I will doubt that you care about the well-being of girls. Also, you're required to give moral justification for child marriage, not just ways that might be pragmatic for maximizing fertility. If Daniel does not, his position is indefensible, and we will trust the medical experts around the world that child marriages should be abolished worldwide. Daniel is arguing against the consensus of medical experts everywhere, so the burden of proof is on him. The lives and the health of young girls everywhere are at stake. Let's see what he has to say.
All right, thank you very much for that opening, Mike. We will kick it over to Daniel for his opening statement as well. Daniel.
Okay. Let's
Oh dear Jesus.
This is gonna be the more intense part.
Be prepared, folks.
Yup, this is gonna
and
be
yes, he does talk about Rebecca being 3 years old. Let me
Oh yeah, we're definitely gonna talk about that. I didn't spend 6 hours for nothing.
You didn't? Come on now. But this is disturbing. When I watched this, I just felt sick to my stomach when he starts explaining his position. I'm like, really, dude?
Don't worry, bro. We'll talk about it. Yeah. Let's get into this.
Daniel, the floor is all yours.
Oh, come on. You're breaking the anticipation.
What's these commercials here?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Just a quick disclaimer that we are debating religious doctrine, history, and ethics. Nowhere am I advocating people break the law. I strongly advise everyone to follow your local laws. Many are appalled that we're even having this debate, and those people probably have a hard time imagining how anyone could ever think that marriage to a minor is acceptable. But the reality is all people historically considered minor marriage perfectly normal. If you give me a chance, I'll explain why. The first step is to acknowledge some basic biological facts. Puberty doesn't happen overnight or at one specific age. Rather, puberty is an extended process lasting from 2 to 5 years. The start of puberty also varies. It usually begins between 8 to 13 in girls or 9 to 15 in boys. Many factors affect puberty, including race and environment. For example, black girls reach puberty a year earlier than white girls. Puberty also accelerates in stressful environments, like food shortages or absent fathers. But even in normal environments, 1% of girls have their periods by age 8 and 4% have them by age 9. This means that they have completed puberty by ages 8 or 9.
Huh?
No.
Come again?
No.
So, okay.
Yes, brother. Can we say pedophile? Oh my gosh. Dude, no, just no.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, wow,
so
was right.
I actually, but I did some research, and I think I found what he's talking about. So, people will say, and not just people. I found scholarly articles. I found like medical health organizations, etc. Was saying that basically, when puberty starts is when girls enter Tanner stage 4 of puberty, and there's only one other stage after that. So it's almost done. It's effectively done. You just have to grow, obviously, and the breasts have to continue growing and things like that. But he doesn't say that here. So it makes him look really weird.
Pervert. Let's just say it. He's a pervert.
Yeah.
Anybody hear me on this? Yeah. Okay.
Overall, children complete puberty in the 8 to 15 age range and start experiencing sexual desires. Now here's
let's appreciate this. Let's appreciate this computers. That's an Acer That's a Acer Predator laptop. It's like a gamer laptop.
Jesus has a sense of humor, does he not?
Yeah.
Someone has an arrow pointing to him, right?
Yeah.
Oh my Lord.
Oh man.
$1 million question. How do children deal with those desires? I want all the opponents of child marriage to give us a practical solution for all the sexually frustrated minors out there. Because those hormones hit like a tsunami, creating desires that need an outlet. The outlet promoted in society today is an absolute disaster. Kids are taught sex ed as early as 9, and some experts want sex ed in kindergarten. You're barely done with primary school and your teachers are passing out condoms and telling you to get birth control. Between 40 to 55% of high schoolers have had full sexual intercourse. If you include oral sex, the percentages are a lot higher. Many children as young as 9 or 10 engage in these sexual behaviors. Experts say we have an epidemic of sexting, for example, among minors, with 25% of teens texting each other naked pictures of themselves. Educators have responded by teaching children to practice safe sexting. Send naked pictures of yourself to other kids safely. Also included in sex ed is pornography education, because the average age a child sees hardcore porn is 10.
What's up?
I will say this about sex education in the schools. We don't need it. We don't need teachers or whoever comes in there. I think that's the parent's job or a family member's job. Why is the school involved with that?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I just don't think it's their place, because look at where we are now as a society when it comes to sex ed in the schools.
Yeah, it's definitely a debated issue. I know I myself would rather, though, people be educated than not, because I don't think, because right, that the school is going to have a curriculum and a set thing for classes on sex ed and things like that.
Yeah.
Health class, right, where we
Yeah.
learn about, also like diet and exercise and sleep and stress, but also sex and other things. But like, we can't necessarily trust that all the parents are going to do that.
Well, I'm just saying that
Right, so.
I agree there should be sex education. I'm not saying that at all, you
Oh,
know.
okay.
But I do not think it's the school's place. And I'm sure there's plenty of avenues we could go through. I'm just saying I do not think it belongs in the schools.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's understandable.
It's just become an accepted fact that children watch porn, so let's just teach them how to do it safely. The shocking news recently is that they've started to teach kindergartners how to masturbate.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, there's an epidemic of porn addiction that's destroying the mental health and well-being of generations of youth. These are today's socially acceptable outlets for childhood sexuality. Hopefully, all Muslims and Christians here agree that fornication, masturbation, and pornography are not acceptable solutions. Rather, these practices destroy the moral fabric of society and corrupt the soul. But the problem actually goes much deeper. Sadly, much of the sexual activity for minors involves sexual abuse. According to the data, 28% of American children ages 14 to 17 have suffered sexual abuse. Some of this happens in churches, but the majority happens in public schools. According to reports, the sexual abuse of students in schools is more than 100 times the abuse in churches. Researchers conclude that by 11th grade, 10% of children have been sexually abused in school. That means that in America alone, 4.5 million children are victims. And none of this includes other forms of sexualizing children, like drag queen story hour, the rise of pornographic educational material in school libraries, the sexualization of children's clothes, beauty pageants, and on and on.
The problem...
I agree with them there. We don't need that either.
Yeah, we all agree. We all agree with that. The problem is these kids are being sexualized. That's a problem. Therefore, child marriage.
Right. We have the solution. We're going to sexualize them even more by marrying them. Like, really, dude? What?
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, fun times.
Point is, childhood sexual desire from puberty is an unstoppable biological force. How does one channel those desires is the question, and Western society channels it through fornication, masturbation, and porn. In the best case, And in the worst case, the sexualization and fetishization of children as young as 4. But for the vast majority of history, people of all religions and cultures had another solution. And that solution is marriage. Marriage is the healthy, wholesome outlet for the natural sexual desire that humans start experiencing at puberty.
And so I want to talk about this. So I did a little research on this, and I corroborated with other people. And I think IP mentions this in another debate review that he did of this debate. But basically, if what happens is we tell people that in order for you to have an outlet for your sexual desire, we're going to get you in child marriage. That does not teach self-control, right? So the brain is obviously developing in these young girls and young men, and the part of the brain that is mitigating self-control has developed, obviously. So obviously children are more likely to experiment sexually because of that. Right. But what you've done here by, let's say, allowing child marriage in a society is not teach them self-control, right?
Thank you.
So not teach them sexual desire, or to control their sexual desire, right. But which admittedly for a lot of people can be a very difficult thing to do. Instead, what we're going to do is marry them off to older guys, and that would be their outlet for sexuality. The problem is that they're not going to be able to control it. And IP mentioned this in a study that he'll bring up later in this debate, but there was a study that he pointed out that mentioned the fact that child marriage did not decrease fornication.
Right.
Right. So things like rape, fornication, and other things you would imagine would actually increase because the woman, for example, cannot rein in his sexual urges because she's a child, and he cannot control them because he was told that he has to fulfill his sexual desires as soon as he gets them. And this is even worse in Islam because Islam also wants polygamy. So a man can have 4 wives, like 4 child brides. So if he sees someone, gets lustful, his first instinct is not going to be, oh, I need to control myself. His first instinct is going to be, let me marry that woman.
Well,
and so it causes issues.
And he's saying that, puberty can be from ages 8 to 13. Mm-hmm. It's like, but all these unstoppable hormones are going on. So has he talked to little girls? I'm sure he has. A little girl's 8. Oh my gosh, I better get married. I can't stop thinking about doing the nasty. Really? An 8-year-old says this? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous,
Yeah, there is that as well. I don't think getting kids to think about sex at a even younger age is going to help. So.
This is just another example that we need to steer people to the Lord, including children, because one of the fruit of the Spirit is self-control. And God will empower us to do what we need to do and what we, should not be doing. He helps us with those things.
Yeah.
Amen.
For sure. All right, so I skipped a little bit here, but he basically goes on and says the sexual crisis is a problem, therefore child marriage.
Yeah, that's the answer.
yeah. But this is where he gets into Western history, and he gets into religious history. And this is the part that we're going to have the most fun.
Oh, yeah. Hold on to your hats, folks.
Yep.
In Jewish norms, a man can marry and have sex with a girl as young as 3. This ruling is found in the Talmud and is based on the precedent set by the Jewish prophet Isaac, who married Rebekah when she was 3 and he was 40, as inferred from biblical passages like Genesis chapter 23 and Genesis chapter 25, verse 20.
Okay, so let's pause, right? Big pause.
Oh, Lord.
So let's talk about this. So Daniel cites 2 passages in Genesis. For me, that did not prove anything when I looked at them. But what I want to focus on is Genesis 24. He conveniently leaves out Genesis 24, where what we see her carrying a whole load of stuff. She's carrying a pitcher of water back and forth with someone. Like, she's
Yeah.
very clearly not 3. So
Right?
please look up Genesis 24:16.
Even the
through 20.
conversation, she's having an adult conversation. She's
Yes.
not 3.
Yes,
Oh,
but I also
Lord.
wanted to share this tab. So can you see this?
Yeah.
So this is the Jewish encyclopedia on Rebecca, the biblical data, the rabbinical literature, things like that.
Yeah.
So here it mentions the rabbis disagreed as to the age of Rebecca at the time of her marriage to Isaac. The statement from this rabbi and another source said that Abraham was informed of Rebecca's birth when he ascended Mount Moriah. This is interpreted by some as meaning that Rebecca was born at the time, and that consequently she was only 3 years old at the time of marriage. Other rabbis, however, conclude from calculations that she was 14 years old, and that therefore she was born 11 years before Adeka, if I'm saying that right. Both numbers being found in different manuscripts. So, and then it continues on from there. It says from the fact that when down to the well, the water rose toward her. I mean, recognized she was the maiden chosen by God to be Isaac's wife, etc. I want to go here. So this is the Talmud. And here it talks about her. It actually says here, talks about like the age of minority, that sort of thing. It says Rabbi Meir does not allow one to assume that is unknown in is similar to the majority of cases. Consequently, one must take into account the possibility that a minor will turn out to be sexually underdeveloped, although this will not be true of most individuals. And he also holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, if I'm saying that right, who said that a sexually undeveloped woman is a zonah and therefore forbidden to a priest. And it continues on.
But all the other
boy
fellas
minor,
can
girl
have
minor
her.
may not have levirate marriage, and it continues on from there. I would encourage you guys to check out this article and read it. This proves that Rabbi Ezra disagrees with Rabbi Ezra and is not concerned that a girl may turn out to be sexually
I'm
undeveloped.
more interested in what God has to say on the subject. You know what I'm saying?
Right. So the problem is that he quotes, from at least how it sounds to me, he quotes the Talmud as if this is rabbinical, or as if this is like law for Judaism.
And agreed upon.
Yeah, and that isn't true. The rabbinical literature and the Talmud is full of recordings of debates. The last section I quoted there is saying that Rabbi this and Rabbi that disagreed about sex for underdeveloped people. So this was a disagreement, but there were Jews that said, no, Rebecca is 14, and so on and so
even
forth. So
that's not much better.
The important part there, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And so this is very problematic. Also, like I said, even if they say Rebecca is 3, the Babylonian Talmud is not trying to make a Jewish law by stating how old she was. But again, that doesn't seem to be the case from the biblical text, and the rabbis disagreed as well. So. But let's continue, because this is going to get better.
Numbers 31, Moses commands his armies to slaughter the enemy, including all adults and male children. However, female virgin children were spared for sex, although some have argued they had to be forcefully married.
Now,
forcefully.
Here's the fun thing. Inspiring philosophy knows that this guy is so predictable. And he literally, and this is what's great with apologetics and particularly with debate style, being able to anticipate your opponent, what your opponent's going to say, and refute it allows you to be able to disarm your opponent's point before he's even able to draw it. So the fact that he's bringing this up despite this being refuted already is very interesting. But just to underscore the fact that this is ridiculous, obviously, again, Moses makes this decision out of anger. In fact, I will show you the text here. So in that's a nice melody.
That's my little Christmas clock. Yes, it is Christmas in May here in Colorado, folks.
Yep, Christmas in May. I'm here for it. So there's obviously context to this. So please check out Numbers 25. We can't go through everything tonight, but please check out Numbers 25. But the Midianites are the bad guys in the story of the text. So the Lord says, the Lord spoke to Moses, exact vengeance for the Israelites from the Midianites, that after that you will be gathered to your people. Now, all the Lord says is exact vengeance, right? Put them under the ban. So then jump down here. As you can see, they fail, right? So they don't exact vengeance the way the Lord expected them to.
Right.
Inspiring philosophy mentions Deuteronomy 20, right? And so they weren't obeying the law as they were supposed to. It says, but Moses was furious with the officers of the army and the commanders, and he says to them, have you allowed all the women to live, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So Moses is the one that makes this judgment call about the young women.
Right.
I would also,
women. It doesn't say young kids. Hello.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would also mention the fact that the women have not known a man relates to the incident in Numbers 25, where the women who did know a man, they knew the Israelites, so they were fornicating or adulterating with the Israelites and getting them to practice idolatry, and all sorts of things were going on. So the distinction is made because even you could make the argument that even in Moses' anger, he's singling out the women who weren't a part of the incident in Numbers 25.
Right.
But again, even if you don't want to go that route, this is a judgment call that Moses makes. And for Muslims, I'm sorry, this was a funny comment.
I know.
For Muslims, you have to keep in mind that from a Christian to a Muslim, just because a prophet does something or says something doesn't necessarily make it right in every circumstance. Context matters.
Context.
Yes. I just have to bring that up because that isn't the case in Islam a lot of the time. So a Muslim will look at the Old Testament, for example, and say, oh, look, a prophet did this, right? The prophets practiced polygamy. So why are you guys protesting against it? Not recognizing how Christians do ethics and morality and
how we use proper hermeneutics, folks.
Yes, and how we do hermeneutics, right? The understanding and study of the interpretation of Scripture.
Yep.
But continue on.
Whether Old or New Testament, there are many discussions of marriage and slavery in the Bible, but there's never any mention of a minimum age for sex, because apparently this wasn't a concern for the Bible's authors.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is what we call the logical fallacy of argument from silence.
Thank you.
I will let him continue because it gets worse, but that is an argument from silence.
But and Jesus never talked about rape. He didn't talk about a lot of things, but a lot of people have a brain in their head and goes, I think this is wrong.
Right, yeah.
Take Exodus chapter 27, verse 7 through 11, which permits a father to sell his daughter as a slave, but doesn't stipulate a minimum age. So he can sell his daughters as slaves or as sex slaves from infanthood. Interestingly, this is where the Bible and the Quran actually differ, as the Quran doesn't sanction selling children as slaves.
Okay.
No, they just want to rape them.
I mean, I don't... Making that point does not help your case. Oh
my gosh. Is he serious?
Yeah, but this is really important to know. Again, this is an argument from silence. Also, he misquotes the text. He meant Exodus 21, not Exodus 27, but... we all make...
It doesn't matter. He's not believing it anyway. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. But this is an argument from silence. This argument is even worse when you realize that, as IP has mentioned, you don't need every command God would like to be in the Bible. Right? So not every command that God or not every command, rather, comes from God. Particularly in the New Testament, again, we have virtue ethics. We can use these ethical principles that God has given us along with science to reason to moral conclusions that are not contradictory to the text.
And that's what it means to love the Lord with your mind.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
The notion that it's acceptable to have sex with children, whether in marriage or slavery, was standard during the time of Jesus. For example, the Bible doesn't mention the specific age of Mary, but pre-modern Christians held she was quite young when she was married to Joseph and impregnated by Father God. According to the official Catholic encyclopedia, Joseph was 80 when he married Mary. She was 12 at the same time being Joseph's wife and impregnated by Father God.
Okay.
I like the way he says Father God, like allegedly he's the Father God, you know?
So... Okay.
This guy.
I don't understand how he doesn't understand Christianity. This was not Father God. This was by the power of the Holy Spirit, right? Mm-hmm. And whatever, and we make that distinction because we're Trinitarians. He would probably think that that is polygamous, or not polygamous, excuse me, polytheism, right?
Yeah, worshiping
a lot of Muslims have come to that conclusion about the understanding of the Trinity. Be that as it may, that's so let's go to the source that he is referring to. So he refers to the Catholic Encyclopedia.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, okay. So he refers to the Catholic Encyclopedia. This is the argument, is the article that he's referring to.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, by the way, that the Catholic Encyclopedia, I'm not just going to doubt
Catholic.
it. Well, yeah, I'm not going to doubt it simply because it's Catholic. That's not on me. But it dates to 1915.
Yeah. Right. That's
so
old.
This is 100 years out of date.
Right.
Which is a really important point to note. But also, if you look here, what this is talking about is apocryphal sources, right?
Ooh.
So let me just
No, he
read a little bit.
No, he didn't.
So let me just read a little bit of the quote here. The apocryphal literature is full of details. The non-admittance of these works into the canon of the sacred books casts a strong suspicion upon their contents, and even granted that some of these facts recorded by them may have founded in trustworthy traditions, it is in most instances next to impossible to discern and sift these particles of true history, from the fantasies with which they are associated.
Yeah.
Among these apocryphal productions, is and then it lists them. If you continue on here, it says that the story of Joseph's marriage is contained in the apocryphal writings. This is the one that recounts his age when he married his original woman, and the age when he supposedly marries Mary. So
yeah.
And later on, this Catholic article will also say that this source is void of authority, right?
Yeah.
So
so he's quoting the Apocrypha and the Catholic Bible. What could be wrong with that?
Yeah, right. Keep in mind too that he's not quoting his sources correctly. So he referred to Exodus 27, 7 through 11. It's Exodus 21, and he made a argument from that passage.
Right.
He referenced the book of Numbers, and he didn't understand what was going on there. He talks about the Babylonian Talmud. It doesn't understand that there was disagreement among the sources, and also doesn't understand that the biblical text implies that she was much older than 3.
He doesn't care
when this occurs.
He's
not citing his sources correctly. And then obviously the Catholic Encyclopedia is not saying that Mary and Joseph were married at these ages. It's saying that this is what happened in a source that is void of authority.
All right.
So now if he stated now keep this in mind too, if he stated his case differently, then I wouldn't have to make this point. If he stated, for example, some ancient Christians may have thought that Mary was young, and this is evident in one of the apocryphal sources. And it's like, okay, here is a source that recounts this. It's not trustworthy, but it does show that some people who claim to be Christian in that ancient time believe that. But that's not how he words this.
No.
So
he's just trying to defend his point and any other arguments are mute and void, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, very, very problematic. But let's continue.
Now, some Christians might question the reliability of the Catholic Encyclopedia, but many other sources, including archaeological evidence, prove that the common age for marriage in Judea at the time of Jesus was 13. This is significant because Jesus' views on marriage would reflect those of his era, meaning that he would have endorsed marriage and sex with minors. We cannot find a single recorded statement from Jesus raising even the slightest objection to the child marriage that was happening all around him.
So, again, this is an argument from silence. It is a fair point. It honestly is a fair point to say that the biblical authors would have used the language and had the thoughts of their cultural context. And we very clearly see that, for example, in the Old Testament. And I think we obviously see that in the New Testament with Paul using sort of virtue ethics, which first started in sort of Greek thought, and creating a Christian virtue ethics system out of it.
Right. Yeah, but he seems to forget, or maybe he's not aware, that Jesus did have something to say about when you harm children.
Right. Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So,
Jesus, I don't think that Jesus would like that very much.
well, he tried to say Jesus was supporting child marriage.
Yeah. So his thing was that Jesus doesn't seem to disagree with the cultural context of his day, therefore he agrees. And that, again, is an argument from silence. That does not logically follow
Silence
at all.
of the Lambs. It's a horror movie, folks. It's a horror movie.
It's great. It's great.
Jesus has no shortage of criticism for the Pharisees and larger society, but for some reason, he doesn't condemn anyone for child marriage. In later periods, some Christians adopted flexible guidelines for marriage that they borrowed from Roman law. Roman law was somewhat unique in setting a minimum marriage age for girls at 12. This was more of a guideline rather than a strict law because there were no legal penalties for marrying earlier. Medieval Christians in the West eventually borrowed the same rule, enshrining it in canon law. Christian women could marry at 12, but in some cases, especially among aristocrats, they married as early as 8 or 9.
Okay, so I don't know if his claim about the aristocrats is true, but
I'm going to say no.
From what I could tell, he is right about canon law. They changed it a little while ago, so it's not 12 anymore. It's like 14, but it was actually 12 for a really long time. And actually, Inspiring Philosophy mentions that in his opening statement when he quotes one of the books that he cites. However, as was also mentioned by Inspiring Philosophy in his opening statement, canon law is not a good representation all the time of what was happening even at the top level of the church, much less the bottom level of the church. So this is like the one good citation that he mentions, or citation.
Well, it's a good thing nothing weird or bad happens in the church today.
Right. I would totally have to agree with you. We are perfect in every way.
In the dark, brother. Don't go to the dark side.
There we go.
Come back. Okay, there you go.
Getting blacker than I already am. All right.
Those are examples from Jewish and Christian history. So why did
those are not? But okay.
Right, huh?
Change. Two factors, industrialization and feminism. Let's talk about industrialization first. In pre-industrial societies, virtually everyone had to be involved with food production first. Two factors, industrialization and feminism. Let's talk about industrialization first. In pre-industrial societies, virtually everyone had to be involved with food production for sheer survival. You couldn't have freeloaders consuming calories but not helping produce calories. This meant that by necessity, all children worked in food production. This is why you don't see any kind of extended schooling for children historically. If kids are in school, they can't work to produce food. But starting in the 18th century, industrialization brought new technologies like tractors and mechanized irrigation. This meant a small part of the population could work as farmers and produce enough food for everyone. This led to the majority of the population moving from food production to manufacturing and service jobs. This caused a major social shift because working on the farm requires no education, but jobs associated with industrialization require more education. To deal with these socioeconomic changes, Western governments gradually introduced mandatory schooling. This went hand in hand with mandatory increases in the age of consent and marriage. This was especially necessary for girls because marriage produces children, and when people have children, they have no time for school. To prevent this, Western governments established minimum ages of consent. In 1791, the French Napoleonic Code established an age of consent of 11. By 2007, the French age of consent was 15. Same thing in Australia, Canada, and Western Europe. In the US, as late as 1880, many states had ages of consent from 10 to 12. In Delaware, it was 7. By 1920, it ranged from 14 to 18. But many may be surprised to hear that today, 25 states don't even have a minimum age of marriage. Between 2000 and 2018, there were 300,000 documented minor marriages in the US, with some brides as young as 10. So industrialization changed attitudes towards child marriage. Feminism did as well. Feminism aims to empower women so that they have careers and status equal to men.
My God. How dare they?
Those evil women wanting a job and what's that? Wearing pants?
Oh my God. So I don't. So due to time, I'm gonna skip a little bit. Because there is definitely more to cover. I'm gonna skip to.
He's just digging himself into a bigger hole. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, definitely. But that's basically his argument. It's that like feminism and industrialization changed things.
Yeah.
Which is probably in part true. It's just that inspiring philosophy gave the historical evidence that people did want the ages to be up, right? Late teens,
that's
early
right.
20s. That seemed to be right.
All over the world, he was showing that.
Ancient people aren't stupid. Like, they could have recognized that if you gave birth at 12, it has more issues. So people might have been like, whoa, well, I'm noticing the correlation here. Maybe we should wait.
Yeah.
And people sometimes did.
Right.
So it's not quite as accurate as he would like to say that it is. Also,
I don't listen to anything a dude says wearing a dress.
I'm dead. I will say, as an anecdote, I was in a part of Detroit that was like pretty much 50% black and 50% Muslim, and I will honestly say I was surprised when I saw women driving, in Muslim women driving.
Yeah.
Because I didn't think that would be a thing that I would see. Because like consistently it's Muslim majority countries that have like that are the worst places to live for women. They are not doing well over there.
No.
So I was honestly surprised, but we will continue here and see what happens.
Modern research casts doubt on the existence of psychological trauma from adult minor sexual relations.
Hold on. Let me hold on. Okay, because this is going to get really interesting.
Pre-modernity viewed adult minor relations as traumatic. Even modern research casts doubt on the existence of psychological trauma from adult minor sexual relations. Psychologists Bruce Ryan, Philip Tromovich, and Robert Bosserman have published meta-studies critically analyzing this. What they discovered is that while there can be problems in some cases, there's no inherent harm with adult minor relationships. The only harm comes from it being socially taboo in current society rather than anything objective or inherent.
Okay, I want to, because I've watched the debate reviews, I've seen the study. I want to explain why inspiring philosophy is laughing so much. Okay, so Bruce Ryan did this study, and what he did was he did a survey of college students. It looks like the measures were self-reported, if I remember correctly. Too? Say that again?
I thought they were homosexuals too. He was studying.
There's a thing there. So Bruce was surveying college students to see if pedophilia and things like that were harmful to people in their later adult life, that sort of thing. His study came to the conclusion that for for kids in college, for guys, this wasn't an issue. But he still says for girls, for the most part, that there was still harm that was there as a result of what had happened to them. So on its face, the very fact that he's quoting this study it's funny because he still says women were harmed, and child marriage is particularly geared towards younger women. Right. So it actually defeats his case, not helps his case.
And I'm
but it gets worse.
I'm going to bet money if someone asked that little sister if she was harmed, she's going to say yeah.
Yeah.
They're not asking the kids.
Yeah. Yeah, you know? Exactly. So that was the other thing, is that the study had like a weird definition of what harm is, and they did not go, because college students obviously at times at least will be able to get over that stuff so they can go to college.
Right.
Other people though won't, right? So his study was very much critiqued. But it gets worse. The reason why this study happened and such is that Bruce Ryan is actually trying to defend homosexual pedophilia.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So he's trying to defend man-boy love, and
love,
and produce this study to try to corroborate that. He spoke at a conference that promotes pedophilia and other things. So, with all that being said, Daniel quotes a source that is defending homosexual pedophilia as evidence of heterosexual child marriage.
Yeah, and isn't homosexuality a no-no in Islam?
Right, and that's another thing too, is that the study actually cited a bunch of sources to talk about the fact that this was also widespread in Muslim cultures too, not just Muslim cultures, but in a lot of Muslim cultures, even still today, man-boy love is practiced.
Excuse me while I vomit.
Yeah. David Wood mentioned in his debate review that he knows a girl who talked to Muslim men who were abused as kids, and found out that in this particular culture, in this country, there is a distinction made between men and boys. So if you do anything sexual with boys, they look the other way because it's not considered homosexual. Because for them, homosexual is with men,
adults,
not boys. And so it's okay in that.
And I'm sure the boys weren't harmed.
This is the weirdest thing for Daniel to cite. And this study was like ostracized by people, and it's viewed as an outlier in the studies. The studies still say that men can go through the same traumatic experiences, even at the same level that women can. So this is the weirdest thing for him to say.
It's cherry picking.
Oh,
he's picking cherries.
It's worse than cherry picking.
Yeah, it is.
Because even if the study's right, it still says women are harmed.
Thank you.
Right, so it.
Yeah.
This is.
But that doesn't matter. We don't care about all that.
Right. It's so weird. It's like this gets challenged in the debate, but like Inspiring Philosophy actually wonders if he's even read the study, and it's funny because Daniel, you've seen the debate, right? So Daniel mentions that he just wants to read the abstract.
Yeah, don't give me the whole freaking thing to read, you know? I want the cliff notes, you know?
Yeah, not the actual study.
Right.
These psychologists received backlash, as you can imagine, and we can...
There's a reason.
Oh my gosh.
Deeper into the studies later, but the point is the claim that minor marriage is bad because it objectively causes psychological harm is unproven. So it's bizarre that...
He's still smiling, right?
It's unproven.
Again, even in that study, it said that women are experiencing psychological harm. The men aren't. The guys, the boys aren't.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Walsh is a mess.
I love you, Walsh.
I love him too.
Anyone should depict new modern norms on pedophilia as obvious or eternal invalidity. Such norms were literally inconceivable in the pre-modern period for the many reasons I've mentioned. All this is why attitudes toward child marriage have shifted historically. The burden is on my opponent to give a better explanation for why there was such a radical change in attitudes starting about 300 years ago. If child marriage is this objective and universal evil, please explain why 99% of humanity throughout history
okay, so...
Oh, here we go with these stats.
He's coming to the end. I will skip to the 28 mark, or 28... 30 mark, just so you guys can see like how Daniel is thinking about this situation.
Oh my
Complete
gosh.
ignorant? Or is it more likely that the author of the Bible is fine with child marriage? That's certainly what countless Christians
Which
throughout
author?
history believed and practiced. Now I want to take things one step further. Not only do I believe that minor marriage was acceptable in the past, I also believe that it's an institution that society abandons at its own peril. The fact of the matter is children hit puberty in the 8 to 15 age range. When puberty hits, they biologically experience strong sexual desires, and they'll express this one way or another. Either they'll express it within the safe, stable bonds of marriage, or they'll express it through masturbation, hooking up, sexting, porn use, or worse. Those are the only two options. Any country that denigrates marriage for adults will inevitably encourage sexual liberation and promiscuity for adults. Likewise, any country that denigrates marriage for minors will inevitably encourage sexual liberation and promiscuity for minors or children. The unprecedented degeneracy we see in society today is a direct consequence of preventing minors' marriage for minors.
Boy.
Christians of all people need to wake up and see what's right in front of them. And ultimately, this is why we all need to appreciate Islam and the example of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In his marriage to Aisha, the mother of the believers, he has provided a timeless example of this institution, which is so desperately necessary for all societies. Thank you.
And that is how Daniel is thinking about this situation. Daniel is thinking in a false dichotomy. Either you must accept my view on Islamic child marriage, or you will inevitably allow society to crumble due to sexual liberation.
Yes,
there are no other options.
We deny child marriage, so we are out on the front lines. We're going to confess this. We're out on the front lines with our fists in the air, telling those 8-year-old kids, fornicate! Fornicate!
Yep. That is exactly what we're doing, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. Give me 1 second here.
It's horrible.
I definitely wanted to get to this other part. I know it's been a while. Thank you guys for sticking around. I appreciate the comments. I appreciate the support too. I'm really glad that people, care about this, and we were able to talk about this.
Yeah.
For sure. But so I wanted to get to the cross-examination at the very least, because this is the most damning part of this
I think
situation.
Mike has a really, really good argument.
Oh man, so good. He did such a great job, and I'm gonna.
But you can tell he was getting heated.
Mike
was getting upset.
He mentioned this in another debate review, but for him, this was the hardest part of the debate to get through.
Oh, I bet.
And I would have to agree. So we'll skip to 40. So we're skipping the rebuttal period. I would encourage you guys.
Because it's a 2-hour video, folks.
Yeah, I would encourage you guys to check out the original video.
Yeah, it's very disturbing, but hey, these are things we got to be battling.
Yeah. All right, so
I actually switched from Chrome to GX a while ago.
I was not paid for this ad. I'm not going to show it.
It was.
Let me see. Okay, 40, 46, 24. Okay. Huh?
I thought you were calling football numbers. I'm the quarterback.
Oh. I'm dead. I haven't watched football in a while. That's crazy. Okay.
I never watched football.
Okay, so this is the cross-examination part.
We are going to jump into the cross-examination. This is where each speaker will get the opportunity to ask questions of the other speaker. We're going to start with Mike asking questions to Daniel, and ideally this is strictly questions.
He's ready.
And then strictly answers from Daniel. Mike, the floor is all yours.
Okay, Daniel, I've noticed a lack of studies in your opening statement and rebuttal. Do you have any studies that speak of anything good coming out of child marriage?
So child marriage is something that is so taboo that no such study could be published.
It's a conspiracy.
I am not aware of a study that is advocating child marriage because it's illegal. It's something that's illegal in Western society because of the mandatory schooling ages. So there are no studies that can get funding to advocate something that's illegal.
Are you aware that most of these studies, and many I cited, were actually done in places like India or Sub-Saharan Africa, Middle East?
Those studies are funded in the West by Western universities.
You mentioned the period comes at the end of puberty. Are you saying someone can marry and have sex with someone prior to getting their period?
So according to Islamic law, when the body is fully formed because of puberty, the period comes at Tanner stage 4, which is the end of puberty. So yes, when there are signs of physical maturity, then it becomes permissible for the husband in Islamic law to have marital relationships or consummate the relation with his bride. And this is the example of the Prophet, peace be upon him, who married 6.
Before the age of menarche, that's what I'm trying to get.
Peace be upon him.
Before the period.
Okay. I thought your argument originally was this is about maximizing fertility. That's why we need to have child marriages. How can you maximize fertility before a girl is ovulating and menstruating if it's years before then? Why can't you're telling me that what I'm trying to get at and trying to ask is like, so you can have sex, marry and have sex with a girl years before she has her period. If that's the case, how is this about maximizing fertility and not about just sadistic pleasure?
Well, I didn't make an argument about maximizing fertility, but I'll still give you the courtesy of addressing your question.
Yes, he did.
What evolutionary biologists suggest, like
maybe not in this debate, but he did,
is that this kind of attraction and wanting to, because they've done studies where they show body outlines without ages of females. Okay. And they show a body outline, like a silhouette of a female at age 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And they ask adult men, which body type do you find most attractive? The men don't know what the ages are. They just see the silhouette. And when you tally all of the responses, the most popular or the most attractive silhouette body shape is of a 14-year-old.
So okay. That's not true. So,
14-year-olds are not fully developed. Hello.
I mean, yeah, even if this was right, this wouldn't help anything. But if my research is correct here, what Daniel is referring to is a chart that you can find online where the responses to what he mentioned are tallied up, and like 13, 14 is at where the chart
average
peaks.
Yeah.
This is online, and
right.
Inspiring Philosophy mentions it and shows it in his response to Daniel's debate review of this. The problem is that this graph is not in the actual study. Like, the actual study that he's talking about doesn't have this graph and isn't proving exactly what he's trying to prove.
Let's say it's true. Let's say his argument is true. And these men, however many of these perverts there were, say, that body right there is hot. She's still only 14. You're a grown man. There's something wrong with you. You know what I'm saying? He's trying to make it seem like, it's just natural. And most guys, come on.
I think that's definitely a big issue, right? Is that even if grown guys do seem to have this attraction to younger girls, and there is this sort of evolutionary explanation for it, that wouldn't prove anything, because the argument is not we do this by nature, therefore it's right.
Right.
That's not a good argument.
It just shows they're all a bunch of pedophiles. We got it.
Yeah, but this is the best part. Get ready, guys.
Yeah,
that's something that is explained evolutionarily. I don't believe in evolution. I know that you do, but they fertilize it an imminent cured the female right at the beginning, the start of when she will potentially.
But you can still have sex before you start maximizing fertility, right?
When the body is physically mature, according to Islamic law.
Do you know what precocious puberty is?
This is the best part.
Yes, I do.
Oh.
Okay, what is it?
You ready, guys?
It means starting puberty unusually early, like beyond averages.
Is there anything in Islam that prevents you from, a man marrying a 5-year-old that started precocious puberty?
No, marriage can happen, you can arrange a marriage even as an infant, but that doesn't mean that sex is allowed.
But could a
man
12 months. Have a marriage to a 5-year-old consummated if she started precocious puberty?
If she starts showing signs of physical maturity, then yes, that's permissible, as I stated. That's
what about
the
age 4?
If there are signs
3.
of...
What
signs? This is something that becomes biologically impossible, because precocious puberty,
I have a study that shows it goes as early as 11 months.
Oh.
Right, well, that's something that the parents would not... see, the thing about Islamic marriage is that parents are involved at these ages. And when you look at the marriage of the Prophet, peace be upon him, to Aisha,
you can see the way
her parents were involved. And so she was not living with the Prophet, peace be upon him, even though she was married to him. So the parents have oversight, and sometimes a qadi or a judge can have oversight if the guardians are not capable, to make sure that the rights and the physical well-being of a child are not,
it keeps going.
harmed by that marriage.
What about, because you've tried to justify sexual slavery after a war. So what if a man finds a 7-year-old, let's say, started her period, could he take her back as a sex slave?
So that's a whole different debate on slavery and concubinage.
I'm just talking about the minor aspect. Would that be fine?
Yeah, so if a girl is any age, she can be taken as
a sex slave, right?
Yeah, as opposed to being left to die after war.
So women can't take care of themselves. They would need to be taken by the men because they're too capable of caring for themselves.
Only about 10 seconds left.
Yeah, a 4-year-old, a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old.
No, I'm talking about the women and the children.
Oh, dear God.
Yeah, this is the topic of sex slavery, which is also endorsed in the Old Testament and practiced by Moses and other prophets like Joshua. So that is a practice found within the Bible. It's found within Islam, within the Quran, and it's practiced again universally.
And
I am aware that he's not the only one that says that there's a kind of sex slavery in the biblical text. You do see in the Mosaic Law specifically, you do see something like Deuteronomy 21:10-14, I believe. So that would be something to deal with. However,
what, Moses was saying to take sex slaves? I've never read that in the Bible.
Yeah, so I can go to it real quick. I mean, either way, these probably aren't children, so it doesn't really help his case.
Right.
But you are allowed to marry in the Mosaic Law here. You were allowed to marry your female captives. There was a rating period and everything.
Right, but those were captives of war. We're not just, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. This is not the same situation.
Right.
I'm not like validating his argument per se.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that is a point that Christians should talk about. But ladies and gentlemen, we have learned from the beautiful religion of Islam and the wonderful example of the Prophet, peace be upon him, that you can marry and have sex with a 4, 5, 3-year-old if she starts precocious puberty. Of course, the parents have oversight, but they could very much say yes. There's obviously Islamic law and government, but they could say yes. And you can take a 6-year-old, 7-year-old back as a sex slave, as opposed, of course, to letting her die an absolutely terrible death.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, in a nutshell, this is all about grown men getting their rocks off. End of story. Nothing to do with the children. Right? This doesn't help the children.
Yeah.
It's disgusting. I'm sorry. I'm just thoroughly disgusted.
No, fair enough. Yeah. Yeah, I mentioned that. So I talked about the Jewish Encyclopedia, which says that some of the rabbis thought that she was 14, which would make a lot more sense. Given
but even then,
you're making a lot of assumptions, yeah.
Yeah, you know. So.
Yep. So that is the beautiful religion of Islam. Now there are there is the open dialogue section. There is a lot of juicy stuff in the open dialogue section.
Yeah. The questions at the end were enjoyable too.
Yeah. I can stay. I got time, so we can definitely go over in the open dialogue section. I would just say that I just thought the opening statements and the cross-examination was most important. But this was IP's cross-examination of Daniel, so we could at least check out Daniel's cross-examination of IP and see how glorious his arguments are.
Yeah.
I don't know how everyone is not just absolutely impressed with Islam. Why are y'all not converted?
Remember I told you after I watched this video, I'm like, I watched it, but I'm traumatized. Because I was like, I couldn't believe this man was saying these things, you know?
Yeah.
But they're actually trying to push pedophilia in our own country.
Mm-hmm.
And make it socially acceptable. And it's like, it's not acceptable. We're harming kids here.
Yeah.
You know? And I love how it's all about the children. No, you're destroying the children.
Yeah, it's about
it's your raging hormones you can't control.
It's about the well-being of society. Okay.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
This brother.
It's
so I do have to go, but I thank you very much for inviting me. As disturbing as this was, it was still an interesting subject to tackle. I think it's something that we have to look into even further. And also, I think I was sharing with my son that when we were getting ready to do our show on circumcision, because we wanted to understand a little bit more about it in the covenant between Abram and God, that I began to research female circumcision, which is really female genital mutilation, and that's disturbing. And some Islam folks do practice that. Mm-hmm. So it goes further than this, and it's disturbing, and it's just like, wow, you know.
Yeah, it is. It can be pretty bad for women, especially in Muslim countries. There's a hadith that, for example, that gives a scientific inaccuracy and basically basically says that women should not breastfeed their children while they're pregnant because the baby in the womb might die. So, yeah, women in Islamic countries might struggle, for example, to find food for their baby because they're not breastfeeding because of that concern. So, there's other things too, but like I said, it's.
Well, aren't we glad they're caring for the women and children?
Yes, yeah, definitely. Inspiring philosophy quotes some pretty good sources but basically, Christianity has had a long tradition of caring about women and children. Obviously, the church hasn't always done right by them, obviously, but there is a long tradition of that as well. I would say.
Well, at least I think we can agree that the Lord always has a soft spot for the innocent. You know, he always does. He will always defend them, and as the church, we need to defend them as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I have to go. Goodbye, everyone.
All right, thank you, Raven, so much for this. This was very well appreciated.
Thank you. I look forward to doing some future podcasts with you, brother.
Oh yeah, for sure. That would be really cool.
Okay, bye.
See you. Well, I will stay on, guys. I want to check out his Daniel's cross-examination of inspiring philosophy. At the very least, cover that before we go. So check this out. This is going to be his arguments are going to absolutely convince you that Islam is the final religion.
I'll give you a chance to wrap up that sentence, and then we got
to Christianity. So I don't see the law.
Daniel, the floor is all yours.
If you edit video,
where are these ads? Like,
with your video calls,
I don't have ads for YouTube, so I just
Wait, do you think fornication is prohibited?
No.
So you think fornication is allowed by God?
Oh no, sorry, I misunderstood. No, I do not think fornication should happen.
Okay, so God has prohibited fornication. Yes? Okay, clearly in the Bible.
Sex outside of marriage is wrong.
And it is condemned by God.
It is condemned by God.
Okay, so which scenario is more immoral? Okay, I'm going to give you two scenarios. Scenario one, a 10-year-old girl who has completed puberty gets legally married with the consent of her parents to a good believing Christian man who is 25 years old. That's scenario one. Scenario two, a 10-year-old girl has a 10-year-old boyfriend and they fornicate whenever they want. Which is more immoral?
I don't have to answer that because that's an either-or situation. I say they're both
one
immoral.
Or the other. Which one is more immoral?
No, both are immoral.
Which one is more immoral?
Both are immoral, Daniel.
So fornication is happening rampantly. Do you have the same kind of feelings of that being evil and wanting to stop it? And you put that big slide about Christians are going to stand against child marriage. I can also put a slide up that says Christians are going to stand against fornication that's happening rampant throughout society.
Yes, we condemn it.
Where?
I'm condemning it right now. Hear me. I'm condemning it.
So, but you didn't think that was more immoral. The child marriage scenario was not more immoral than the fornication.
We're debating child marriage, and I'm pointing out it's immoral. I can also agree fornication.
So you did not say that was more immoral. Okay, got it.
I have no reason to say one or more.
So I've seen how Muslims have reacted to this part of the debate, and Daniel himself, too, if I remember correctly, seems to think that this was like a W for him, and it wasn't. I don't understand why he thinks he needs to press inspiring philosophy on this. Both of them are immoral, and he doesn't have to say one is more immoral than the other, especially if you look at it from different ethical perspectives. he doesn't know the circumstances, he doesn't know the situation, but based upon the data that he has, 2 10-year-olds fornicating and then, separating them, getting them therapy, whatever they need to know they shouldn't do that, they have to control themselves, as well as making sure they're okay, would be a less immoral but still immoral situation based upon the data he cited about child marriage than a much older guy marrying a much older girl. Regardless of the parental consent, she cannot consent. And the literature, of course, is clear about the very negative effects of this, which Daniel just ignores through his questions and so on and so forth.
Well, according to the Bible, you do have a reason to say it, because the Bible explicitly condemns sex out of marriage, but it has nothing to say about child marriage. According to
that, again, we've already talked about the ethics and biblical interpretation, but that's not true.
Christian sources, Jesus' mother was either 12 or 14 when married to Joseph. When it comes to child marriage, what do you think is more likely? Option 1, Jesus held views similar to those found in the society of his time and thus had no objection to child marriage. Or option 2, Jesus held views similar to the United States in 2023 and thus viewed child marriage as very evil. Which one is more likely?
Again, I quoted scholars like Michael Satlow that argued the average age was not 13, especially in Palestine.
Is there any pre-modern scholar who has this opinion?
Yeah, Cyrannus of Ephesus, as I cited in my opening statement. Giles of Rome.
What did you say? Repeat.
That is an important thing to note. Again, this is not a either-or situation. Jesus doesn't have to explicitly condemn something, especially when you have virtue ethics. Again, nor does Jesus necessarily have to agree with the cultural norms of his time. And again, if Jesus doesn't say what he thinks, then depending on how he words it and how he worded it earlier, this is a argument from silence. Yeah.
All right, I'll go to Cyrannus of Ephesus, as you want. Let me pull up his quote here. Cyrannus of Ephesus. He says, okay, so this, within regard to the birth passage, difficult labor takes place when the uterus is either a narrow orifice or a small one or a small neck. He goes on to say, a small orifice or a small neck occurs for many reasons, for it obtains whenever women married before maturity conceive and give birth, while the uterus is not fully grown or fundus of the uteri expanded.
Where's that condemnation of marrying before 18?
He is basically going on and saying that these are problems. When there's a small orifice, it results in problems.
So now you're making the descriptive prescriptive error, because where is that prohibiting or speaking out or condemning child marriage? We didn't see that in that reference. So is there any other pre-modern scholar who condemns child marriage?
Again, he doesn't necessarily need a pre-modern scholar. Just because they're not modern doesn't mean they're right. And just because they're modern doesn't mean that they're wrong either, which is a important point to make. He's just thinking in this false dichotomy.
Why did Kim Phillips' book, Albertus Magnus?
They're not pre-modern scholars. Where is the citation?
They're writing in the 1300s.
Find me a quote. What is a quote from a scholar that says child marriage is wrong, not a descriptive statement?
Okay, you're asking me to give you exact wording, yet I can quote them basically condemning it in their own words or talking about the harms of it.
Where? Read it. Read it for me.
Again, I quoted, for example, Kim Phillips' book. She says, Albertus Magnus stated that while the physical changes associated with puberty enabled boys and girls to feel desire and enter sexual relations, the seed of both parties was either too weak or not admitted, so the weak offspring nonetheless were a result. The notion that intercourse and childbearing at too early an age had deleterious effects and had great authority. However, in some views of Aristotle, translated by Giles of Rome and De Remind translated by John of English. She goes on to say, the knowing of women in kind and childing condemn sex before 15, for example. She quotes, again, Albertus Magnus, Giles of Rome.
Again, none of what you quoted was a condemnation of child marriage.
Listen,
yeah, they're diligent.
He literally just said that the scholar is like quoting sources that mention a condemnation of marriage. Something doesn't necessarily have to be in a law or something like that for something to be condemned. And Inspired Philosophy has brought this up in this debate, but you can also, Daniel has made the claim in another debate that harm is evidence of wrongdoing. And so if people are pointing out the harm that this can cause, then that can be evidence that they are doing something wrong. So he doesn't need a condemnation of something in law per se. But let's go ahead and continue here.
Deleterious effects there are more likelihood of complication at that age, but you also have more complications at age 40 or 50. Is that just as immoral?
The medical experts say that's not a comparison. And again,
which
I
experts?
Can talk about.
Which experts? You cited mortality and you cited uterine tears. Those are just as likely at age 50.
No, they're not.
Yes, they are.
No,
I can cite you that. Well, pull up the National Health Institute, and we can show you exactly the charts that show that. And
my opening statement literally had studies showing that no, it is not. It is much worse. It's 5 times more likely under the age of 15.
You compared 15 to 25. You didn't compare 15 to 50 or 45. Age 40, a woman at age 45 having a child is also very highly likely to get uterine tears.
Okay, then they should probably retire at that point. What's the point? So
your argument implies that is as immoral as child marriage.
Having a child at that age, if it's going to cause those kind of problems, but does it cause the psychiatric problems I mentioned? Does it cause the high risk of divorce?
So that's an important thing to mention. He's trying to make a equivocation. As far as I can tell, he's viewing this as, or what he's trying to do is keep IP consistent. If you're going to say that child marriage is immoral because of all of these harmful effects, then you should also say that marriage at older ages is wrong because of all of these, because of all of these negative effects. The problem is that the effects of child marriage are not nearly as bad as the effects of having children and birth and sex at ages 30, 40, 50, etc. They're definitely there. There are definitely risk factors that increase when you get older, and that is what the literature indicates. But again, she can consent. She knows a thing or two, right? She can get old. She's older, right? More mature mentally, physically. The birth canal and everything is wider, and her hips are wider, so she would be able to have children a little easier. Obviously, like I said, more mentally mature. That sort of thing. They may not have suffered from sexual abuse in life. This is just a completely different situation. Like, she can consent, right? She can also have sex with protection so that she doesn't get pregnant, and so the whole negative effects cease. If you have sex with protection on a child, then that will still continue to have effects. So it's not inspiring philosophy is, and we are too, are being consistent in this. Daniel is the one that doesn't think that, but he's very, very incorrect about that.
I agree. So you find it. So you would find it just as immoral.
I can give you a chance to finish this question that you just started, Daniel, and I'll give Mike you a chance to respond. That's it.
No, I'd have another question.
I can condemn child marriage because, again, I gave a cumulative case from all sorts of problems it causes.
Yeah, and all the things that you cited have holes in them.
That's right. Man, can we? Listen,
we have to.
Well,
I have to go to the next portion.
There is no pre-modern scholar that actually condemns child marriage. All of the citations that you just read show
that's not true, and it doesn't matter. But continue.
Medical descriptions. They're not condemning. They're not saying this is immoral. So you're making the same descriptive, prescriptive fallacy that you accuse me of.
I'll give you a chance to respond, Mike, as this is open dialogue time.
Okay. So that will be the end of that. Wow. We got a lot of amazing stuff from Daniel Haqiqatjou. I don't know why none of you guys are converting to Islam, but there is a couple things I do want to mention, though. There are a lot of Muslims who would disagree with Daniel. He's not representing necessarily the Islamic position. So some scholars, like I mentioned prior in this live stream, question the authenticity of the hadith that mention Aisha marrying Muhammad at an early age. Some of them would view the passage in the Quran that I mentioned, 65 verse 4, differently. So Daniel's conclusions are Daniel's, and not necessarily the conclusion of every Muslim. However, this is the popular view. So a lot of commentators throughout Islamic history have said that child marriage is okay. If the hadith sources can be trusted, Muhammad did marry a child, and people like Muhammad Hijab and other Muslim scholars and very, very popular Muslims are in favor of a kind of child marriage and as definitely polygamy. Polygamy is all over their sources as well. So we kind of have to keep blasting away at the child marriage ideas, of course, in Islam, which seem to be more popular than sort of a more critical scholarly approach in these regards. But yeah, not every Muslim would support Daniel, and they don't. And Inspiring Philosophy and others have talked about that. So I'm not, as much as I joke, I'm not trying to like smear Islam or anything on the mere basis of this, although I do think it's problematic. Thank you, Jesse. This is actually really cool that you guys came out and supported me. This is my first live stream. This is the first time I'm hosting a live stream, and this is one of the few videos, pretty much the first video that is exclusively to YouTube. So it was kind of a big thing, and I'm real glad that you guys came out in support for that. I have been here for 2 hours, so I'm probably not going to tackle their open dialogue, especially because their open dialogue is like 40 minutes long, like 30 to 40 minutes long, and that would take way too long to cover. But there were a lot of juicy details in there as well. So please definitely check out the full debate, the cross-examination, the Q&A, the closing statements. We didn't touch those because there was like way too much in these segments alone to really be able to go further beyond that, unless we wanted to be here for like 3 or more hours, which I am not trying to do. So, but thank you guys so much. Yes, I will put the link to the debate in the description for sure. That's another thing I have to do. I have to edit this video real quick after this live is over. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. There was definitely, obviously, a little bit of discomfort, and considering that this is the first time I'm doing this sort of thing, and this is the material, right? And the kinds of things that are said in this debate are just absolutely insane. But I felt that it was important to do. And I would say that being more extroverted kind of helps you be in front of the camera. At least it can. So I do appreciate that, though, despite any amount of hidden anxiety. Yeah, thank you guys for coming out. I really do appreciate it. We are definitely about to close. So if you guys have any like last comments or questions or anything like that, please go ahead and send them to me. But questions, comments, concerns, anything like that. But otherwise, we are good. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, for sure. I would definitely be down to do that. So real quick, while you guys are here, I have a video coming out tomorrow morning. It's set to premiere at around 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. So I don't expect you guys to catch it when it premieres, but it'll be there afterwards. It's a debate. It's a video where I am reviewing another video on YouTube, basically Origins Explained, which I can show you guys real quick here. Basically, they put out this video, the 10 most forbidden texts from the Bible. So I made a video response to the first half of this. I think they get a lot of their facts and information wrong. And as you can see, it was viewed by a lot of different people And I definitely want to help Christians understand better what is actually going on with these books of the Bible, how we got the canon and things like that. So in the first video in the biblical canon series, which will be exclusive to YouTube, we will be talking about the first 5 of these forbidden texts. And then in the second video, we'll cover the 5th one, which is the Book of Enoch, all the way until the last one, which I believe is the Apocalypse of Paul, if I remember correctly. Oh, my bad. I just realized this whole time wasn't even sharing my screen. Yep. So this is the video I'll be responding to. So that'll be there tomorrow. I would definitely encourage you guys to check it out if you care about the canon of Scripture. I know that some of you guys deal with Hebrew Israelites, and Hebrew Israelites, of course, often accept the apocryphal books or the deuterocanonical, depending on who they are, right? And Christians often don't understand or know where they got the biblical canon from, and various things like that. So I think that could definitely help. That would be super cool. I've been watching vocab for years, so that would actually be a really cool thing to be able to do. Hopefully one day I'll be able to get on there for sure. I'll be down with that. My summer is going to be very interesting. So yeah, I would encourage you guys to check out that video when it comes out. I will post about it as well when I do actually wake up in the morning. And yeah, thanks for coming, guys. I really do appreciate it. And I will catch you guys next time.